Welcome to this special series of the TCG Pro Show. I'm Brad, and we're back with something I am super excited about. We've created this special set of episodes. We partnered with TChem, a local service business here in the area, who has made it their career to not just serve their clients with products and services, but offer them mentoring. And we thought this was a great opportunity to share something near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's entrepreneurship. How to start and run a successful small business. We've titled this series Ready, Aim, Fire, and we're going to be diving into everything from what do you do before you begin to how do you grow with sales, profitability, growing your team. We talk about a lot of topics in this, but anyway, I'm super excited about it, and without any further ado, let's jump right into this episode.
It takes more than pressure to get the job done. I'm Jonathan with TChem. Follow along as we get the down and dirty on how to save money, finish faster, and be a successful pressure washing pro.
Well, welcome back to the TCG podcast. This is kind of a different episode, a different way of doing things. We are doing a special series all about small business, starting a business, running a successful business. So if you are at that point where you're thinking about running a business or thinking about starting a business, this is a great podcast to listen to. You're going to want to hear this. But what if you already have a business? I think there's going to be some tips, some things that you can take out of what we're going to talk about that will be equally as valuable. So this is not just for people that are on the front side of it, but if you're running a small business, we're going to talk about several topics. So this is going to be a series of shows we're going to run. What really inspired this is I was listening the other day, and you might have heard this saying before, but it's that most small business owners operate in a ready, fire, aim sequencing. It's all just by the seat of your pants. They take action, and then they think about, well, maybe I should or shouldn't have done that. And I think the idea is that what if we approached it different? What if you took the time to aim before you fired? What if you had a plan? How could that make a difference? So I've got a special group of guys here. We just talked about it. I think we figured we have a combined 100 years of running small businesses. So good, bad, or worse, it is that way. I'm joined by Don Williams, my dad, here.
Hello.
And then we have Jonathan from TChem.
How's it going?
And John from TChem.
Thanks for inviting me.
So we're actually putting this together. This is a partnership between the Closing Guys and TChem. And this was also inspired by some things I've learned talking to you guys. You guys have talked a lot about how in your business you have mentored a lot of other small business owners. And I thought there's something here that just absolutely needs to be shared. So that's what we're going to do today. I want to talk a little bit about getting set up right. And that's before you even start your business. So if you've already started a business, you may need to go back and do things. But if you did some of these things maybe before you started, it might be easier than undoing mistakes. It is always messy doing things in a small business. You can't get around that. But I think there are some things to consider. So I'm making everybody shoot off the cuff here. So nobody has notes, but I know that everybody has some ideas. So Dad, before you started a business, if you could look back now and give maybe one piece of something that you think needs to be done before someone starts a business, what would that be?
I mean, that's kind of a broad question. There's a lot of things that I wish that I had done ahead of time. But I suppose evaluating the market.
What do you mean by that?
You know, what is the competition? How broad is the market? Is there enough here for one more person in this business? You know, I think that would be a good place to start.
Do you have any examples, or do you guys think of any examples where people don't do that and it kind of gets them into trouble? I can think of several, even here locally.
Yeah, that's a key point that Don brought up, the fact that if it's a crowded field and you're trying to carve out a niche from that crowded field, Either you've got something that's really unique, or you're just setting yourself up for failure, for the simple reason that many of your competitors have years and years of momentum, and momentum is everything. So they can afford to make mistakes and undercut you till they can essentially starve you out if you're not in a situation where you've got some deep pockets to fall back on. One common thread that we see amongst a lot of the customers that come through here, their wives have good jobs. So therefore, they've always got a ready source of income other than what they're endeavoring to build.
So I think that kind of leads me to another question, and I want to come back to this. But if you were to start a business, or you were to talk to somebody that's starting a business, should they just go ahead and quit their job and go at it full force with all their time, all their effort? Or should they moonlight and try to keep that steady source of income as they got going?
Well, I have a strong opinion with that, but I think that it may run, counter to what a lot of people would advise. But I think, the businesses that I've started, they've been interrelated, and I have had a source of income as I started a new business, new venture, and it has been extremely helpful to me. I know friends that have, for instance, in the building business, that tried to live out of the draw from the bank in order to build houses, and it got them in trouble. And but I found that having a source of income, being married to someone perhaps that has a good income, has a that kind of thing, that's just real helpful.
Yeah,
it takes the stress off a little bit of trying to get started.
Yeah, because you can end up working for cash flow, literally. If the bills are totally dependent upon just one source of income, especially if it's a new venue that you've entered into. So, caution is important in that regard. I had a full-time job when I started back in the pressure washing business, almost 40 years ago. And so I had benefits and medical and so forth. So I didn't have to worry about surviving on what we were generating. And eventually we got to a point where we had enough revenue coming in from this sidebar business that I had that I was able to go full time. And I'd have to say that, timing is everything. And the economy went kind of flat right after that. So I ended up going back to where I came from just so I could pay my bills. But even still, I learned enough on that initial experience that I carried it with me so that when things improved again, economy-wise, I could go back and go full-time again. So sometimes you have to ease into it and just kind of weigh the way things are going in the economy. So that was a big part because, a lot of small businesses can end up in what I call venues where there's not a lot of discretionary income. We know somebody very close to us who was in the fitness business. Well, people like to be fit, but that's not necessarily something that has to happen. And when the economy goes flat, stuff like that, that's the first thing that goes away. Mm-hmm. But the rent doesn't go away. The light bill doesn't go away. Insurance doesn't go away. Food on the table, all that stuff is always in place. But discretion. So you have to be careful about, is it a venue where people don't really need it? But if it's something that people really need, then you got a fighting chance from day one.
That's a really interesting point. One thing that I've noticed, and I've heard other people say the same thing, is the time that it takes from when you start to when you're making the money you thought you would is always longer and harder.
Yeah. Good point.
So having something to fall back on is going to probably make all the difference. You're already fighting a losing battle. And I don't mean that in a discouraging thing, but you have to have your mindset right to be in business for yourself. 8 out of 10 businesses don't make it past 5 years. So you got 3 to 5 years to figure this out. And if you don't have the cash flow to stay in business for 6 months, you are just you're really putting yourself at a higher risk. You're taking a much, much bigger chance of not succeeding. So that's just a thought. I think that's really interesting. But I actually want to go back to what you were talking about there being room in the market, because that's a trend in starting small businesses that is a losing trend. Because something is hot does not mean that you should do it. Just because you know someone else that is doing it does not mean you should do it. And I can think of a couple of trends that have rolled through this town, and I'm sure they are anywhere that someone's listening to this. And it was I don't know, 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, everybody was getting into the vape retail space. Yeah. And so there was none in town, and then there was one, and then there was like 8 or 10. And there was one in every shopping center. And yet you still saw people all the time online. People selling it online. Yeah. And it was because other people did it that they thought they should do it. Well, there's only so many people that are going to buy that product.
Right. CBD oil.
And that's the new one right now, isn't it? How many hemp stores are there? We live in a small town. How many are there in town? 10, 15?
At least 10 to 15. 2 of them are side by side, actually.
And it's the most bizarre thing. And it's not just small businesses that do this. We see big businesses do this too, but you don't have the revenue they do to get into a fighting match by putting your business across the street from your competitor.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you're trying to start a retail business, which is probably not the right business to start in our environment and the economy we live in today. And you gotta, just because other people are doing it, you gotta evaluate what is the real need for the business and what kind of competition am I going to be facing and what am I going to offer? What is going to be my unique way of offering it so that, you know, we help mentor people in figuring out what part of their business to grow before we even start marketing that product. And one of the things you really have to think about is if you do something that's exactly what everyone else is doing, then you are guaranteed to fight a price war. The only way, if what you do is no better than what Joe Blow does down the street, you're going to have to beat him in price to beat him. So you have to figure out what are you going to do that makes people willing to pay you to do it beyond price. Because, again, fighting a price war is a real hard way to get on your feet. So,
well, and Don mentioned checking your market before you start, where I think knowing your prices, but knowing how diversified you can be out of that market is key before you start too, because then that gives you a competitive advantage. Like for instance, with the things that we've done, and I know down the road on these episodes, we're going to get into expanding and being diversified. But I think that's key is to start that out with that thought process, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. How can you diversify your product to offer another service or add value to that service to your one single customer so you can take your customer base and worry about growing X amount of customers instead of trying to grow 100 customers, you can only grow 10. You can grow 10 to the 10th degree instead of trying to do 100 just at one. It gives you that added value, and then you can expand off of that. It allows for fluctuation in season, especially with what we do. We have a heating side, we have the summer side, and they're always changing. But it's amazing how many different customers are diversified themselves, and they kind of cross over. So just being and we're talking about service industries. So, I mean, I know it's kind of a dying art, really, is what we're seeing. But knowing that ahead of time is also key, as knowing your market, but also knowing how you can diversify in that market. So that way you're adding that extra service, because you're going to get in a price war. If you have a retail store of any kind, it's going to be competitive, especially with the way things sell on the internet. But it's okay if that's a volume-based business, because then the value add you had is the diversification that you can add to them so they can get 2, 3, 4 things in one stop, as opposed to just going to get their tires changed. Well, now they've got everything down the line.
It's the second sell is always much easier than the first sell.
Yes, it is.
Once somebody's already a customer, we tend to do business with people that we already know and we already trust, right? So
every day.
Being able to offer that second service, the second product, the third product, it's a whole lot easier than going and knocking on doors cold and they don't know who you are or why they should give you the time of day, right?
Something Don mentioned earlier about measure the competition in the market. In this town, there are more plumbers in this town than there are fire hydrants, literally. But they all have something to do. Am I right? Because we're in a kind of a booming market currently, building and so forth. But eventually that market will kind of taper off a little bit. And then these guys will be fighting a price war, unless they really, really are good, very impeccably honest and so forth, and neat, clean, and organized. And you can see the difference. Some plumbers, I wouldn't want them on my property, that's for sure. But there's 3 things you probably ought to write down on the front end of this. Anybody who's listening to this, first of all, find the need and fill it. That's number one. Okay. Number 2 is, if you're going to start a business, whatever you're going to show in public, test in private. Don't ever go into a place unprepared. Okay. And thirdly, don't ever overpromise and underdeliver, because the word gets out really fast. Write those 3 things down. They're extremely important guidelines if you want to succeed. So I said, write it down.
That's really good advice. That is really good advice. And I see small service businesses every day who are struggling with maybe all 3.
Yeah.
Maybe all 3.
And I think the reason for part of that is they don't count the cost. They're running around trying to make cash flow, make ends, and they overpromise because they're trying to get that next paycheck, that kind of thing.
It's panic.
So planning ahead, kind of back to getting started, planning ahead, that's biblical, right? I mean,
it is.
Count the cost. A man doesn't start a house or build a house without knowing the cost. He doesn't go to war without knowing the cost. And I think that is very true in starting a business.
Sound advice. And fortunately, we didn't have the internet when I started, 40 years ago. So you had to kind of figure it out on your own. But today it's easy to go online and see what's really going on out there. And some of it's jaded, some of it's oversold and so forth, but there is a lot of good information out there. Even in the markets that we're in, I can go on there and glean information that really helps me. I've been in business all these many, many years. So, and some of it is just, it's a bunch of phooey, but in large measure, there is some good stuff out there. And some people are so well-meaning, they don't realize they're giving their business away with the information that they actually provide. We've all seen it if you go on there, because we're in a highly technical business. So you see that where a guy, he's proud because he's reinvented the wheel and he wants the whole world to know about it. He doesn't realize he's just created competition for himself, because they're well-meaning, so many people out there. And I, find a need and fill it. And it's out there. And it's easy to duplicate somebody who's been a trailblazer and has already set the precedent. Once you pick up and just follow the yellow brick road, and it'll lead you right to a new business. And a lot of these guys are really, really good entrepreneurs. They'll put in a little twist, a little nuance that all of a sudden it opens up a whole new world for you, because you never thought about that. And it's like, that's the missing part of the puzzle I've been looking for. And it's online. It really is. It can help you, as you develop.
It's interesting. You talk about the guy that, the inventor, whatever. Inventors aren't always good business people. They're great at coming up with an idea, but as far as getting it to market, that's a whole nother thing. So just because you come up with something that's new, there can be a battle getting it to market that some are.
It is. And it's exposure. I have a friend that, and this is the most bizarre example I can think of. Somewhere along the line, I guess in going to craft shows, he noticed that there was a need. Again, find a need and fill it. And, the average flower pot, they're all shaped the same. They have a little lip on them, And he thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice to put flowers in there, plants, whatever, and actually put it, where he could hang it up, So somehow he developed this plastic clip that you can actually take a flower pot and you can hang it up somewhere, so that we can kind of decorate your porch and so forth. And this man has made a fortune just selling these little clips for $2 or $3 a piece at lawn and garden shows, because people go in there to lawn and garden show and they like to go home with something anyway. And he's out there selling these things, in big city, lawn and garden shows by the thousands. And he's made a fortune off this little plastic clip. Case in point.
Well, I think for some people, I'm always attracted to being the person that comes up with the new great idea. That's able to do that, even if it's something simple. You don't have to do that to start a business, though. You don't, to make good money in a business. You can do something that is very common but poorly done and do a great job, be the best at it, and do well. And this, I want to ask everybody this question, and we'll probably wrap up this segment. How do you balance deciding whether to do something based on that ease of entry, right? So if the higher the barrier to get into something, the less chance of competition you have, right? If it costs $1 million to start something, you have already weeded out a whole lot of people coming up behind you and doing it. If it requires an advanced degree, you've weeded out a whole lot of your competition, versus something that you could go out and have a $200 piece of equipment and your truck and you get started with it. How do you balance making a decision, or what are your thoughts on that? Does it really matter? Should you try to find something that differentiates you? Jonathan, you talked about skills. Highly technically skilled people are becoming few and far between, and you can almost guarantee yourself work if you go to the trouble to get a journeyman certificate in some things like machining or welding.
That's right.
But that takes time. And I know some people are going to think, well, I mean, like me, I would want to start a business now, not 3 or 4 years from now. How do you balance that when you go into it? And what's your advice with that when choosing?
Well, I would say, what's your experience? That should be the start. What's your background? What are you bringing to the table? It costs a whole lot of money to start a restaurant. I mean, if you just come off, working construction and want to start a restaurant, I mean, I know it's pretty expensive to get one started, but I mean, what are your odds of being successful?
Slim.
If you're just kind of changing, from what you've been doing, but experience. I think that's going to be that would be the number one thing for me. But
and what's your passion?
Oh yeah,
because there are times when that's the only thing that will keep you going is you're passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it better be something that you're really passionate about, because again, sometimes that's all you have, because you're working for cash flow until something changes and you become more profitable.
You better be passionate about what you're taking on, or you will not make it. That's just bottom line. You better be passionate about it.
And even when you start to become successful, never assume that your successes will make everybody happy.
Well, and execute your plan too. I mean, if you've got a plan ahead of time, stick to the plan. In a service industry, when you start, a lot of guys come in with a pressure washer they bought at Lowe's or Home Depot that's barely enough flow to wash a home, but you know what they're ultimately selling is not the service. They're selling themselves. And the biggest portion of starting with that is sticking to your plan, making it routine, making sure that you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're learning as you're going from the beginning. Start small and grow, but every time you reach a customer, the goal is the repeat customer, because then you've gone from 1 job to 2 jobs, which then tells their neighbor, which is 3 jobs, which turns into 4 for the next year. So that's the biggest thing, is when you develop your plan, your system of business, how you're going to present yourself, stick to it. So that way, don't get discouraged, because we all get discouraged at some point. There's always going to be a month where you're staring at the books thinking, oh my goodness, how's it going to work? And then it does, because you've stuck to your plan.
So Jonathan, I just kind of want to tag along with what you're saying. If you went to the bank to borrow money to start a business, they're going to want a business plan.
Right.
And so, but that's not the only reason you need a business plan. Even if it's not a complete plan, you need to have a plan. You need to take the time, put a business plan together,
Right.
go through that. And if you don't know how to do that, find somebody that is in business that can help you with it. I think that's great advice too. So
yeah, that is key, because a lot of guys want to skip that step of the business plan. Oh, that's for people that actually are in big business, or it's too tedious. Well, if you're actually going to start a business, you already have the business plan. It's in your head. You just have to figure out how to put it on paper. And like you said, Don, find someone that can help you. It's worth a couple $100 to pay a planning lawyer or somebody like that can help you put it to paper, because then you have something to put on your wall that you can go back to when times are tough.
Right.
And a great resource is the Small Business Administration, which is funded by tax dollars. So it's not going to cost you anything for them to help you unless you try and borrow some money. But they'll help you get to that point where, okay, now it is time to borrow some money. But that's the first thing they're going to demand is a business plan, if they're going to even consider loaning you any money. But that's tax dollars that funds the SBA.
Yep. So that's SBA.gov is how you can get to them. Yeah. I want to touch on what you said about a plan. Something that I have found to be so true, and this is a flaw of mine, and I don't think I'm alone. You get started in something, or you're doing something, and shiny objects, things that appear as opportunities, new ideas come along. And if you don't have a plan about how you want to run and grow your business, it is so easy to get distracted about, ooh, we could do this too. Ooh, we could do that.
Right.
Ooh, that looks like an easy way to make an extra or whatever. And if you don't have a plan, you're going to fall for that. And that is something that will be true forever in business. The bigger you get, it won't stop. The opportunities will just get bigger and more often will come to you.
That's right.
And as you grow your business, if it doesn't have a clear direction, a business is always fighting to have cash flow and have the means and the organization to support itself. And if you don't have a clear plan, you could people dry up businesses, huge businesses, by going down rabbit holes that are not in line with their core focus as a business. So having a plan, know what you want before, know your next step. Maybe you don't know what it's going to look like 10 years down the road. No one does. Not in the world we live in. It changes too fast. But you certainly can make a picture of what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years.
That's right.
Where do you want it to get to? That will drive so many of the decisions you make. And so many of the things we're going to talk about in the next episodes, because you're going to have to come to a point eventually. Do you want a business that has someone else working for you, or do you just want to work for yourself? How do you be profitable? How much income does the business really need to make? I mean, figuring out some of these things, like how much do you need to survive? How many jobs are you going to have to sell? What are going to be the expenses involved?
Yeah.
What is it going to take to get those jobs?
How much debt do you currently have?
And if you don't have a grip on any of this, you can't. Seat of your pants will get you in trouble.
Yeah.
It'll get you in a lot of trouble. So, and you might get lucky and you might get off to a bang, but it will catch up with you.
Always. Yeah.
Eventually.
And we haven't mentioned it, but I think humility, being humble, realizing that success is going to come in waves. Like you just said, Brad, there's going to be real big peaks where you're going to have weeks of just, man, this is amazing. It's the best job. And then, it's going to rain for a month straight and you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. But just be humble about it and realize that your first 5 years is about growing your business, not about reaching the precipice to start with. It's about growing your business. It's about saving. It's about maintaining. It's about living frugal. So that way, when you reach that next threshold, then you're ready to go over the edge and you're prepared to do that.
You got to pay your dues before you're really in a position to succeed, in my humble opinion. And sometimes it's a painful experience. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. But one thing I found is, especially with new customers, if they ask you a question you don't have an answer to, don't make something up. Say, I don't have an answer to that question, but I'll get back to you with an answer. And that way they'll respect you. But if you give them the wrong answer, because sometimes they're setting you up, to see if you're really legitimate or not.
It's done.
And then they'll say, here's another one. We get them in here all the time, so we have that experience, And you talked about distraction. A lot of people, when they see that you're succeeding, they want to kind of ride in on your coattails, and they'll come in with all kinds of ideas and distractions and so forth, thinking that you can take their ideas and run with it, but it can ruin you. You really can. And that happened right here in this building. I'm not going to go into the details, but we spent a lot of money in a market that really didn't exist, and we were hoodwinked into thinking that it did exist. And the bar had been lowered so far that there was no money in it, And by the time we realized that, we were probably $40,000 worth of investment, in that market. We were able to break even, but that was about it, No details, but it happened. And that was after I'd been in business for many years, But all that hoopla just dried up. It was amazing, Cheerleaders, I always call them. Cheerleaders.
Take emotion out of the game if you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. Yes, It's very hard.
And these were people I had been doing business with, and there was a fair amount of legitimacy with what we had done over the years as far as what they would bring in and so forth. So I thought, well, there's just another niche that they found. And it didn't turn out that way because I didn't dig deep enough. So you're right on about getting distracted into different rabbit
Well, and
holes.
too, Don mentioned passion earlier, but I think finding the balance between passion about what you're doing and being emotional about what you're doing. I know that sounds, counterintuitive, but it is true. You have to find the balance between the two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, be passionate about what you do, but be logical about the decisions you make,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Because it's no fun working your way out of a hole, man. No. I mean, it can take years to work out of the hole that you've dug for yourself by making, a passionate decision, not based on enough information.
Nope.
So I think we've done a really good job of glamorizing. And none of this is meant to discourage you. If you are the kind of person who sees yourself, who wants the freedom, who has the drive to start a business, absolutely do it. I don't think there's anyone at this table that would ever go back to anything else unless that's what it took to eat. And we'd still probably trying to find a way to hustle something because we like the challenge. You have to like the challenge. You have to want to solve problems. You have to be a problem solver. That's something we didn't say. You have to have that mentality. There's going to be problems. Your ability to solve them will determine your ability to survive. But you should absolutely do it. Just take the time to be prepared. Don't just do something because you heard about your buddy's cousin's brother that did this thing and made all this money. And don't do it for money.
That's right.
Don't do it for money. Being great at what you do because you're passionate will bring the money. I know that's like the most cliche in the world. Do a good job and the money will come. And maybe the money... Right. Maybe that's not 100% true, but what is true is if you do a great job, you're going to stand a chance of staying in business.
You know, and the rewards are far greater than the monetary rewards. I mean, just the joy, the satisfaction of seeing it all come together and seeing people benefit from what you do. It's pretty, you know, that's huge.
I'd say I agree with that. The biggest joy in all of it is satisfaction in doing something that provides value to someone else, where you know that, man, I really leaned into my God-given potential to do this.
That's exactly right.
So does anybody have any closing thoughts before we?
The loyalty will come if you're honest, because integrity is everything, especially in the world we're living in today, because the lack of integrity is everywhere. So honesty really pays handsome dividends in the long run. You know,
and we said we weren't going to get into politics.
And on that note, it has been an awesome episode. We will see you guys back in part 2 of our Starting a Small Business series. Bye, guys.
No,